healthcare. So how many of y'all are really interested in healthcare?
Yep.
Really? Okay. See something. So I was one of those who had the hands down. I found healthcare, I call it by divine accident. What happened, I finished my undergrad at UNC Chapel Hill, so I'm North Carolina born and bred. I've been living out here in LA for the last 6 years. So go Tar Heels. All right, all right. And I know it's Southern California and everything, so. But by divine accident, so I finished up undergrad, was getting ready to go to business school. And one of my best friends, who is now a big-time psychiatrist down in Miami, I think I heard somebody said Miami earlier. But he called me up and he was like, hey, there's a summertime job at Duke Medical Center Emergency Department, business office. Are you interested? I said, okay, why not? Be good money to get to before I go to grad school. Next thing I know, I'm just learning. It's just absorbing. Never thought about becoming a healthcare administrator at all. But by the end of the summer, my boss said, you know, guy, I see something in you. Would you like to continue this on a more permanent basis? And I said, sure. And I did. And so, that was 1994. How many of y'all were born in 94? No? Oh, okay. Had a couple of old heads in there. So, many years later, my career, this industry that I'm passionate about has taken me all over the world. So I did grad school, became a U.S. Navy healthcare officer for about 10 years, and now I'm working for the VA up here in Los Angeles as a healthcare administrator. So, here I am. I'm glad to see y'all on the
I'm loving all the people we got in this room. This is a great turnout, and I'm going to lean heavy on you guys because personally, I have very little experience in the healthcare industry, so I'm going to be learning a lot. So one thing I maybe can teach myself along with these students is, as they sit here, they are going through their classes, they're trying to figure out degrees, they're going through their schooling. What are some types of experiences or skills that you would suggest that they need to learn or prepare as they enter into the world of healthcare? And again, as I'm asking these questions, not everybody has to say something, but if you felt or you have some advice you would like to pass on, please feel free to talk, but don't feel that everybody needs to answer every question. So the skills that you think that they need to hone to best prepare for them going into healthcare. Go for it, Lisa.
Because I'm so shy, sorry guys. I think that one of the best things you can do is start volunteering. Find an organization, a nonprofit organization, preferably that is in the healthcare area. And then in terms of classes, I teach nonprofit management, but it's open to every single student. So they don't have to be a business major. I would say get some business skills if you're going to go into healthcare in any way, whether you become a doctor, whether you become a nurse, whether you become an administrator. Get some business skills. Take a general business class. Take a general marketing class. And then take some general classes in public policy. Get a wide range of coursework under your belt.
And did anybody else hear that echo in here? I mean, how many times has service came up through this weekend, right? And it is finding an organization to volunteer your time. All of you have talents and skills that will add value. It's just finding those opportunities. So Lisa, and we did not talk before this, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, Lisa did that all on her own.
I did. He didn't prep me.
Other skills or an area that you believe that would prepare them going into the health?
Well, I'm going to just add on to what was already said. What I have found from experience as a founder of a nonprofit, as a coaching manager, as an adjunct faculty, that the transition between campus and your professional life is a leap. It's like leaping from here to the other side. And one of the key skills for me is emotional intelligence. If you don't know what that is, write it down, okay? It is a framework that really helps you to not only be aware of what's around you, but also your interpersonal skills. So one of the things that I like to say, and I said this just this week, is that during an exit interview with an intern who had worked 67 hours with us, and I told her, I said, 15% of your work life is your technical training, your education, what skills that you bring to the table, and your certificates. 85% is communicating. Business moves through relationships. It moves through communication. So what do I mean by that? Well, follow through, ask questions. If you're not clear, ask for clarification. If your schedule changes, let us know. Show up, take a risk. Your story does matter. We have a very defined in my coaching manager practice, we have a skill building piece that's called reframing your narrative. And what really is important is that in the healthcare arena, health is in all policy and health is our wealth. So that means we're participating in health legislation, we're participating in the health industry, but we also have an opportunity to tell our story. And a lot of us come from families that are vulnerable in terms of health disparities, and that story that you have helps to add to the solutions because it's a firsthand connection. All of those things are important, but just recognizing that you are not in the room alone. So I have a question for you. Who likes teamwork?
Oh.
Okay. Well, working is all about teamwork. And for us, teamwork now means that it's intergenerational. It means that we're in a digital platform, so we'll actually be in a meeting and some of the members are remote, some of the members are in a different time zone, some of the members are global. And it's really important that if for all of you, raise your hand again, who love teamwork? Okay, this is what we do. This is all about what we do. And if you're shy about that, because there are some who study medicine or who studied any of the clinical areas, tend to like to research, and or if do you have any McNair scholars in the room? Okay, all right. So, you know, they're learning to be the future faculty and really shy away from working with people. But I want to let you know, you got to take all the opportunities to help you to groom working with people.
Guys, now I'm glad I know Winona. Just sitting here, I know why everybody knows her. And so thank you. Relationships, guys, again, teamwork. All right, so next we have these groups of students. They're sitting here waiting for their school, their opportunities. Before they get into the field, whether it be a personal or something that you have personally seen yourself, what are some mistakes that you've seen young professionals in this industry make that you want them to avoid, right?
I'll hop right into that question. I think this idea that your degree or your education is it. This field is about people at the end of the day. So I think you should just always remember that. And you know, we kind of touched upon it a little bit. What I think is really important are those soft skills. And I think one of the things that could help you in this field is to find a mentor or mentors. That's been, for me, really critical as I've taken on different roles and wore different hats. But I think it's really essential, whether it's a peer mentor or it's, you know, somebody who has gone through this before you and can really help guide you in that. I think that's very critical. And I think the other thing that I would say too is your education does not end with your degree. So whether you have a bachelor's, you have a master's in public health, or you have a doctorate, this field is constantly changing. Like I would have never thought, you know, when I got my degree 18 years ago, that I would need to be so facile in the digital space. We were not taught that. As somebody who has a background in health education and promotion, I would have never thought that. I would have never thought that I would also need to know how to track policies, but that's the reality of where we're at. And so I would say continue to learn and continue to invest in yourself. It's really an investment in your career for you to have further education. So whether it's in your field or a different skill set, a lot of these things are just going to be continue to change. And the reality is that's just how the nature of this industry is going to be.
I want to add to the mentor point because I think there are a lot of formal mentor programs that exist, but your mentorship doesn't have to be formal. And I have found, like you, like people are honored to be asked. And I think sometimes you might be afraid to ask someone because they're busy and they have a big title and a big job. But I've never seen or heard of someone saying no to a request like that. So, you know, look for people that you want to be like and have jobs that you want to have, and don't be afraid to reach out and ask them, or ask someone you know who knows them, would you be willing to mentor me occasionally, take my call or answer a text for me, because I've not ever experienced a no in that, and you know, people are honored to do that, so take advantage of that.
I'm going to add, based on what Winona said, be willing to be part of a team. When I have younger people come work for me, and I think that the biggest challenge is, I'll give you an example. I do not know social media. I don't understand it. I don't know it. I don't understand it at all. But I've got a staff person who's really good at it. And when the staff person comes to me, he's got it all figured out. Don't have everything all figured out. Remember that you're a team, and that while I'm coaching you, you're coaching me. And it's collaborative. Be willing to collaborate and be willing to educate. I hate to say it, but you're going to be, if you're working for baby boomers, you may be doing some education with them. And the people that do that in a way that I don't feel stupid, oh my gosh, you're mine forever.
So, things to not do. So my father, when I took on this job at Heath, when I first started, I was so excited. Like, yeah, get to use. I wasn't going to use my degree because I wasn't into healthcare, but I wanted to make a difference, right? You know, you're eager, you want to prove yourself, et cetera, et cetera. So he told me, he said, don't get involved in office politics, like the office gossip, right? So if somebody comes to you, right? So you're working, first couple of weeks on the job, people are looking at you, then they start talking to you. And somebody's going to come up and say, hey, well, you know, Ruth over there, you know, you got to watch out for her because ABCD, right? So he said if they already know each other, Ruth and Sam know each other, right? And Sam is talking about Ruth like that, what's to make you think that he's not going to talk about you like that, okay? So stay out of office politics, just be a sponge, observe, stay quiet, you know, just learn. My man Stephen Covey, first seek to understand, then be understood. So you want to know your surroundings. So stay out of office politics, office gossip. And then another thing I wanted to do, my boss who eventually said, God, I want to take you along with me, okay? I was so like enamored by him. His name is Mr. Gerald Riley, mentor like to this day. So I really wanted to impress Mr. Riley. And just so happens, my dad knew him from college. You know, but the way it worked, like an old school family, so my dad's friends were not my friends. So it didn't matter, right? But I really wanted to impress Mr. Riley so much. And I said, Dad, so, you know, what do I do, man? You know, I want to stop him in the hallway and just wow him with all my stuff that I got from my fresh undergrad degree. He said, you don't need to do that. Just do what you do and let them come to you. So that means, you know, everybody's observing you. So even though if you think that you're not being listened to, or because you are a student coming out, right? So that's how people are going to look at you. But people pay attention, and then eventually Mr. Riley started coming to me. And then a few months later, that summertime job, he offered me a permanent job. So stay out of politics, stay out of gossip, I should say, and don't rush to impress. Just kind of stay the course, learn, observe, and know that you are being observed and they're learning from you too. We're learning from you too.
from Guy's story, this man he wanted to so impress knew his father, right? So it's a small world, but going back to what Noyland said earlier, the industry is small. Not only everybody knows Winona, right? You are working at, you get an opportunity, right? And you show up day in, day out, you're working hard. You don't know who else that person knows. And how often do you guys reach out to your network to fill a position?
All the
All
time.
the time.
And so if you're able to leave a good impression by letting your work speak for itself, you're going to come to mind when these people start talking to each other. All right? So again, it's going in and not looking at it as a job, guys. You're not here to find a job. You're here to find an opportunity. So whatever you're doing is going to take you to that new opportunity. And leading us into our next question, in this industry, one of my favorite sayings is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, right? How many of you all thought you had it all planned out before? How did it turn out the way you planned it?
Not at all.
No. I would love you to share maybe an experience or defining moment that came across in your career and maybe how it came to about, whether an opportunity opened itself, whether through serving, through somebody you did impress, but something that totally unexpected came onto your plate that changed the direction of your career.
I'll talk about a story that happened this week.
Ooh.
So this is really fresh in my mind. As I had shared, I had an exit interview with an intern, and I really had to think about here's a person who was just right. She had all the maternal child health background. She understood the mission of our work. She connected to it. And my plan was, oh my God, I've got somebody who's here and she understands the research. I can give her the hard stuff. She can analyze it, and that would be great. But my priority, and the reason why I had to terminate the relationship, was because my priority is that I operate in a digital space. And we just hosted a cybersecurity awareness training, which, Noyland was a part of that. And it's really important that we're in the space where we're beginning to launch our digital legacy. So what does that have to do with maternal child health? Well, guess what? Cybersecurity happens at the employee level, at the desk level. So if your passwords aren't correct, if you're clicking onto something and you really don't know what it is, it could just completely blow or breach an entire organization. And the cost that's involved with that makes us understand what Noyland said. 2000, I remember Y2K. We thought that
We thought it was going to
we were all going to see our maker, okay? And here we are 17 years later, none of us knew that the digital infrastructure, the virtual infrastructure, is really driving the way that we're going to do business. So that's not an area that I want to say is my strength, but I am conversant in it. And I recognize that if we're going to build a digital legacy, that all priorities, all resources have to bring people together. So that means IT advisors, IT consultants, people who want to work in the digital space, which means that, when we have conversations, there's usually somebody who is who is being conferenced in, or any of the areas that are related to it. But I had to make a decision right then and there and realize, as much as this person fit the mission of the organization, the way we do business has changed, and we really need to secure that. And so that means that our investments going to funders, looking at old policies that were written in 2009, it's 2017. Those policies look like a joke. It's like, really? Oh my God. So we really have to bring those resources together. So my plan was, it's like, oh my God, this young lady fits. She was recommended in. But the reality is that I don't need her for that right now. What I need is a team that can really shore us up and bring us to the platform that we want to work in. Because in business, and for all of us who have business skills, have MBAs, you got to recognize that you grow when you have the structure to support it. If you grow outside of that, you will topple.
Thank you.
I'm going to add to that a little bit, because I always think that God laughs at me. I wasn't going to go into nonprofit, then I got into nonprofit. I wasn't going to stay in nonprofit, and right after graduate school, I went on an interview in the healthcare industry in a sales position and fell asleep in the interview and went home and decided to stay in the nonprofit world that I loved. But, you know, I had an aha moment recently. I made a lot of change in smaller organizations. This is healthcare. I love healthcare. We have, our focus is on mental health and dental services. And I worked there about 2 years, and I had 4 bosses in 2 years, and was 3 bosses, and was getting ready to go on number 4. And I just talked to God and said, I'm not staying here anymore. I don't like it here anymore. I love what I'm doing, but I'm going to find someplace else to go. And God, by the way, there's only one way I'm going to stay, and that's if so-and-so becomes the leader. Because I have a coworker who is absolutely amazing. And guess what? He got hired as the executive director, and I'm still there. So I think that, you know, being flexible. Just be flexible. Don't get too set in your ways, and look for those opportunities, because you have to be willing. You have to be willing to go sometimes where you're led instead of where you think you're supposed to be going. That's been the biggest opportunity for change. It will manifest itself. If there's something you're supposed to be doing, just keep open, and I bet you it'll come to you.
That's one of the things I was thinking about before this panel, is that I feel like especially college students get so focused on what am I going to do with my life? What kind of job am I going to have? What am I going to do with this degree that I worked so hard for? And some of that you're just not going to figure out right away. But what you can figure out right away is what you want to accomplish in your life. And if you can think broadly about what you want to accomplish, then you'll figure out the jobs and the career path that'll lead you there. But I feel like sometimes, I mean, I was in college in '94, a long, long time ago, but I still remember being so stressed about a career path and the first job and the next job and how I was going to maneuver all that. And LinkedIn did not exist. And how was I going to meet people? And I allowed myself to be open to the possibility of what I could do. I didn't know there could be a job doing cause marketing and corporate philanthropy. I didn't know that people would pay me to help companies find charities to give money to. I didn't even know that existed. But I knew I wanted to do something that gave back, that helped people in need, that helped kids. It was general, but that's what I wanted to accomplish. And so each decision along the way has led me closer and closer to that accomplishment. And the jobs become what they are. And you know, I've actually only worked 3 places in 23 years, and I feel lucky for that because I tend to dig in when I get somewhere. But I'm always open. You know, I'm always open to the possibility of an opportunity and what could be there. So all I would say is don't put yourself under all that pressure to map it out. Just think about what you want to accomplish in your life.
And ask yourself what you're passionate about. That's the first thing I ask my students in class. What are your passions? And know what they are.
Summing up, and as if you were in the last panel, what you guys were saying is it's okay not to know, but it's not okay not to go. You have to keep moving. That next opportunity, that next job. If you don't know where it's going to lead you, that's okay. There's going to be uncertainty that you have to deal with. But if you don't know, that's all right. But keep going. Persistence, perseverance. Thank you. Gosh, I'm just... Next. Please explain some of the frustrations that you've had in the healthcare field and what you've learned from these frustrations and how you overcame them.
I was going to say, don't get me started.
But as these young professionals are going into the industry, what are some maybe frustrations that they could expect, and what do you suggest to them how they handle them?
First thing I want to say is it's a great career choice. You know, I don't see jobs going away. So I just want to say that I think there's going to be lots of jobs in healthcare. But it is increasingly challenging. For me, what I've come to learn is the competition is a little unnerving. The competition internally as it relates to office politics, and then the competition externally as it relates to caring for our sickest kids. And so I've had to figure out a way to work within. I just want to do a good thing, but yet technically I'm kind of competing against some other big children's hospitals. You know, what does that look like and mean? So that, you know, for me is kind of an internal and external challenge, but you know, healthcare it's a good space to be in if you want to know that you're going to be in it for a long time. I don't see it as something that's ever going to go away. Or the need, it's just going to keep changing, right? Technology is going to keep changing, policies will keep changing. Our need keeps getting greater, more kids need, you know, it just keeps going. So it's a little overwhelming, but it's also exciting because you know I'm going to be busy until I'm done, and someone else will take this up.
So I know, like when I started, so one of the things that I never planned to do was join the Navy. I don't come from a military family, right? But that opportunity came, I fought it, eventually took it, and wow, got to see the world, worked with a lot of great people. But there's a cultural change too. So I joined pretty late in life. I was like 29 when I joined. And so I had this civilian mindset, still do to an extent, but it was so different. And I remember, so now this is 1999, 2001, right? So did grad school, one of the top schools in the country, so I'm like, take on the world. I learned from my undergrad experience, and I made my mistakes there. I'm not going to make them now, right? So I did, and one of the things that I had to battle, and this is what y'all will face too, just the cultural change, but I was that new kid on the block, right? So I had a lot to prove. I'm coming in as this like young officer, and I'm one of those, so kind of like we're discussing millennials now, Generation X, we were the millennials back in the day, right? So I was this Gen X, you're one of those new Navy guys, so I had to fight that perception against, from the old Navy, the old way of doing healthcare, seasoned veterans, and I had to constantly prove myself. And I even got to a point where I had this boss, but you have to learn how to deal with it, right? I even prayed, I was almost like, God, did you make a mistake? I mean, I was really at that, I was like, oh man, I was probably 6 months into the job. And I was like, this is not for me. I made a mistake, or God made a mistake. You know, but that came and went. So I listened, you know, talked to some folks, kind of took me to the side, and again, like what my dad was telling me earlier, stay away from the politics, the gossips and all that stuff. Continue to prove yourself. So when you face those adversity, and you will face adversity and challenges, there'll be jealous coworkers, there'll be jealous bosses, the organizational culture, it might take some time to fit into, but you gotta stay at it, stay the course, and like what was said earlier, you know, you may not know exactly what you are doing career-wise, career path-wise, but if you know what you want to accomplish, so keep that in mind. So you want to keep the big picture in mind when you face those challenges and opportunities. And this is a diverse group, so I'm going to keep it as real as I can. So in grad school, I remember my capstone professor, she said for folks like me, right? You know, got to work twice as hard, and you do, but it's fine because you know what? That makes you even stronger, more focused, and even better. So just regardless of what comes your way, look at it as a trial, as a test that you will overcome.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely, Noila.
And Guy, thanks for that. I'm
Yep.
gonna follow your lead. I think one of my biggest frustrations, to be quite honest with you, is in many of the spaces that I've been in, wearing different hats in health, is that I've seen people who have decision-making power making a lot of widespread policies and decisions that don't actually come from the communities that are most impacted. And I think for me that has been really frustrating. Because oftentimes those community members or people who have been impacted by different conditions or situations, they're not at those tables that decide these things. And I think we're actually seeing it right now, what's happening nationally. So what I will say is, if you have an opportunity in your career to be invited to those tables, take that very seriously. Take that role very seriously. And if, I'm speaking as somebody who is an immigrant, as a woman, as somebody who is perceived as young, as a person of color. A lot of times we are in those spaces and we're tokenized, and that's a reality, because I see a lot of young people of color here. When you are in those spaces, you will be tokenized, and I think in your leadership journey, you're going to have to figure out how to navigate that and what does that mean for you. But those are some of the frustrations that I see.
And I'm going to give you the opposite side of that. I have always worked in disenfranchised, marginalized, low-income communities. It's where I gravitated. I don't know how, why, that's where God put me. I've had the opposite thing come out. As a white woman, why are you there? And my biggest frustration, I think, is dealing with people that come from privilege and don't understand it. I haven't experienced it myself. My kids have, my stepkids have. I'm in a place where, when I teach, I come up with the same thing. It is my job to empower, to provide empowering services, not to fix. Sometimes I'm not the right person to give that message. But one of the biggest frustrations that I've had is listening to stupidity. And I have a story that I will never forget. We had a group of people from Orange County come out. They were from a think tank. And they came out and they were providing one of the health organizations I work for money, a $2,500 check. And my boss went out and was giving them a tour. And he came back and somehow I wasn't there. Now, as a fundraiser, it's my job to educate. It's not my job to put my foot in my mouth. And I'm very passionate. If something pisses me off, I'm going to say it. And I am so glad, talk about God, I was not there for a reason, because the woman from that think tank went up to my boss and said, where are the poor people? I don't see them in the lobby. Where are the poor people? And when he told me that story, I just looked at him and said, I am so glad I wasn't there, because I would have said something. And he just looked at her and he said, well, what do poor people look like? And the woman said, well, they're not dirty. Everybody in this lobby is clean. And I think that's the kind of stuff that frustrates me, is that it's my job as a fundraiser, it's my job as a healthcare, somebody that's a healthcare fundraiser, to educate. And sometimes I'm not the right person to give that message. Often I am. But it's that stupidity that that's the biggest frustration, is that hey, I'm talking to people that I want them to support my cause, but they don't understand it. They are coming from a place of privilege and they don't see the other side. So I would say that's my biggest frustration.
So can I say real quick? So one thing I was also taught to do is observe. So I see kind of like the facial, like, oh Lord. So we're just telling you what's up, right? Kind of prepare you. But I don't want y'all to go home, being all pessimistic or anything like that. So one, recognize that y'all are in a fantastic position. So the Circle of Change Leadership Conference, y'all know better than I just found out about this last year. Huge, impactful opportunity to network and meet others like you, because y'all like the brightest, right? And nobody is ever alone. So now y'all know y'all not alone. We're just giving you just a couple of life lessons, tidbits of life lessons. Like when my dad told me, don't alphas gossip, stay away from that, don't talk to your boss, observe. I was like, trying to rain on my parade. He was just giving me some good advice. So that's what we're doing. So we want you to stay positive. You got to stay focused. You got to stay consistent. You got to stay open. And, that's how you network. So I'm sorry I'm going off on a tangent. But, people observe and listen. So it's up, how can I say it? To change people's perceptions, it's got to stay you. So stay diligent, stay hardworking, get to know them. Let them get to know you. That's how I was able to overcome a bunch of obstacles, was to put myself in positions like what was mentioned. When you get that opportunity to come to the table, so to speak. Take that opportunity, even if you feel you're not ready. Take that opportunity and let yourself shine. Okay, thank you.
Love it.
I wanted to add to this conversation because I think that for the healthcare arena, we're in a very trying time. So it's like the tale of two cities. It's like the best of times and it's the worst of times. And I think what I've discovered around frustration is that there is a top-down approach, meaning the government, whether it's federal or state or even county, that has a formula for what our communities look like. And those of us who live in our communities, we work in our communities, we worship in our communities, we play in our communities, we understand the dynamics of what's going on around us, whether it's environment and asthma, whether it's cardiovascular disease and food deserts. You could pick anything. We live in our communities and we experience what's going on. So I think in the frustration, I've had the opportunity to sit at tables right now where I'm holding what I call the puzzle piece in the room. And I have to look around and nobody's saying anything. And I have to put that puzzle piece down and be able to call something out and to shake up what the usual suspects are saying. Because what the government does, which is a good thing, is collect data. So anything that is related to collecting data from the census on down is something that's helpful because it helps us to make a case. But that data can also be skewed. And so when we're telling a case for support or whether we are talking about health disparities, we have to be able to bring from a perspective, in my business, the perspective of the community. And one of the challenges that I brought out is that, okay, we're making reinvestments in the core mission of my work, but there is one speaker who represents my community. So you're saying to me that the people who are experienced in the room, it translates, the people who are in the room, we don't have enough experience, we don't have enough degrees to be able to sit here and facilitate on a new reinvestment around the work. We have to have the courage. So let that frustration turn into an opportunity. And so, you know, from an MBA standpoint, we're strategists. So that means, you know, when you're sitting there taking notes, you know, I'm quick to like, you know, do a SWOT analysis, do a quick one, you know. If I start writing, that means, okay, I gotta do something.
Watch out.
You know,
You know it's coming.
you know, or, you know, to really kind of assess what's going on. Who's making all the big statements, the big sweeping claiming statements that are speaking for me? And it's like, well, you mean to tell me that there is no one else that's like me in the scholar community, in whatever, who can really be a better spokesperson to be heard? So what I'm saying is that in this environment, and nobody knew that 2017 was going to be the way it is. There are so many opportunities to speak up, but it means that the ones who really speak up and who are credible witnesses are you. You have the education, you have the voice, you have tools that we didn't have 17 years ago. Because you're coming into there's new opportunities around health. So for example, in the public health arena, I have a millennial advisor who's earned a degree in health communications. That didn't exist. That just didn't exist. And so as a result of that, she's able to bring that strategic thinking to a broader conversation that would help me to be able to be a voice. But I can turn around to her and say, you know, here's your opportunity from your perspective, from your lens, because our frustration a lot of times can make us shut down and make us say, I don't want to be here. And guess what? You'll repeat that cycle over and over and over, and you're going to say it's us. But in reality, we have to take responsibility for those areas that are frustrating and have the courage to speak out. But when you have the courage and everybody goes, oh, that is so empowering. It is extremely empowering. It's empowering for us to be able to say the right thing, to do the right thing when everyone else, or it appears that everyone else doesn't really care about it, but we have the courage, because there are a lot of times there are people in the room, and Norland and I talked about this, who don't say anything. So you're like, what? What's the deal? How come you didn't say anything? So that means, well then, okay, then I'm gonna have to say something. But what it does is that it brings voice and it brings validity to what we do. So my point is, yes, there's frustration. We have frustration right now. Things are happening so rapidly that we really have to focus, and that's why I appreciate, you know, the coaching and the health and wellness that you brought to the table, Noylan, because it is frustrating. And you can stay up 24 hours and things are just cycling around. But at the end of the day, we need, what are we going to do with that frustration? It's like potential and kinetic energy, you know. So what we need to do is just, where do we exercise that? And in our sphere of influence, we can really turn that frustration around and really work on our behalf.
Snap, anybody? Like, shoot. And it is,
You got a question back there, are you?
well, we'll be getting to questions and answers in just one moment. And actually, I'm going to throw it to you guys here in the field. I just wanted to bring some of these nuggets together, that the change that we're talking about, that Lisa wants to make, each and every one of you have the opportunity to do that. Do not sell yourself short on the value that you can bring to the table. But it's having the courage to take that step. It's to say something. Being a leader is not saying what everybody expects you to say. Being a leader is saying what nobody else will say. And you have to take that responsibility, because you know better. You're part of the Circle of Change family. You can't just have people walking around talking, I don't see any poor people. That needs to change, and that starts with you guys. Right now, and it may not be comfortable, but as Lonnie said, you better get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's what a leader does. So as you are at the table, as you have get these opportunities, the way that you empower others, that you give them the courage, is being that example. Because when somebody sees you do that, that's going to give them the idea that they can do it. As you sit here and listen to each and every one of them, and you hear these examples, Winona, I just want to sit here and listen to her all day. Because I want to be at that table, and I'll be like, well, Winona did it, I can do it. So, but you can be Winona. Don't put her up on this pedestal. You don't have to be Mahatma Gandhi, you don't have to be Martin Luther King. Be you. Do what you can where you are at. And that is the change we're looking for. So, I'm sorry, yes, you just get me excited. But you guys ask much better questions than I do. So we're going to throw it to you guys to ask whatever is the ponderings that you have been boiling up. Right, sir, right here. And ma'am next.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. That's why I raised my hand when she was talking. What Josh had talked about is what irritates you most is what you're called upon to solve. And that's what I feel it is. Healthcare is for me. I did speak earlier, and I don't think y'all were there. It's about cancer. I really dislike cancer and everything about it, and in the system of healthcare. So when I speak being a radiology technician, you know, there's harms and there's risk of causing cancer. But why isn't there any changes to that to decrease that, when we're just trying to help a person, you know, who has been fractured with fractured bones or broken bones, but at the same time we're helping them, but we're, you know, causing some harm. So that's where I want to come in and, you know, like you said, I want to add to that irritation, that anger, you know. I want to make a difference that people don't usually think about, you know, cancer. So, yeah, I just wanted to add to that.
And it's that echo,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's the passion. You hear in each and every one of those voices. Winona, tell them more.
Well, I cannot speak to the cancer community, and I do understand what you're talking about. But I can tell you this so you can learn a little bit about my story and about who I am and how I got into the role of eliminating health disparities in infant mortality, because I'm an accidental health professional. I was the 19-year-old who brought her 6-week-old baby back to campus, moved to family housing, worked as a peer counselor, worked in co-chaired an Associated Students Committee, earned a community service award at graduation, and graduated, earned a bachelor's degree with double majors in Black Studies and Economics. So when you hear that side of the story, it's like, okay. And it was hard because there were 5 people on campus who thought I was going to make it. But it was my high school education that let me know that that school, this is how we roll. So on that foundation, gave me the foundation to go and finish my undergrad degree in a 5-year period. Thankfully, my son was born in the summer. That's the reason why I took him back with me. And she knows my son. And, but when I think about how the health disparities piece came to me, is because in my first career, which was in retail management, so I lived away, my son and I, we lived out of the area, we lived in San Francisco. I was in a high profile environment, but I was on 24 hours because I was a young mom. I had a large staff that I had to manage, and I found one day that I woke up at 28 years old and I couldn't feel my ankles. So I was diagnosed with hypertension. And I was given a choice of, you can use diuretics for the rest of your life, you can be fitted for surgical hose, or you can just change jobs. I'm like, okay, we'll change jobs. But at 28 years old on the fast track, that's like professional suicide. And it was really, really difficult for me to make that example, but that's when so first of all, I went into administrative support work, which I was not trained to do that, okay? But it gave me the opportunity to go headlong into parent advocacy and understanding my community and getting all sectors involved in the work that I was doing. And so by the time it was mid-career and I wanted to, do something different, I was bored. My volunteer work was much more significant than my employment. And so I had a colleague ask me, so if you didn't have to change jobs, if you didn't have to go to another city, if you didn't have to go back to school, what is it that you would do? And I said, well, I'm the co-chair of the workshop committee for a major conference that was put on by the Pasadena Commission on the Status of Women at the time. And I said, and so I advocate for women and girls. I said, but you know what? I would love to be able to do that for Black women. And 6 months later, I was in the job that's launched this part of my career for the last 21 years. So what I say to you is that frustration is an opportunity. It really is, and sometimes nobody can answer that, and they have to have the courage. And I remember saying that to her, because on the one side, I'm like, I'm supposed to be the boss, I'm supposed to be in charge, and I don't want to, I'm a bad secretary, I'm bad. I'm just a bad secretary, and I tried to be good at it. But boy, all of those skills led here, because when I came to this work, I brought all those resources to the table. So now when I'm looking at the next generation, which is you, from the I Dream years, is that I understand what it means, because you're battling with chronic stress that leads to chronic illness. You are battling with microaggression, with implicit bias that leads to chronic illness, that leads to chronic stress, and in my business, that leads to preterm births, low birth weight babies, and infant deaths. I get it. And I recognize that as early as the undergrad level, we bring some very bad habits into our professional life. And we just go right here, and we hit the wall, and things start happening health-wise, and we're wondering, what happened? But also, we now have younger professionals who are not 40 who are dying, who have early diagnosis of cancer, of all kinds of stuff. And that is going to be real important to manage from your career out, because social media and emerging technologies have just got us all spiraling, but they're distractions. So all this old school stuff, that still works. It still works. But what happens if the electricity, went down? We know what to do. You know what the calendar is. Get on. We know what to do. So I think, but getting back to the frustration, I think it's important, and I said this earlier, is knowing your story and owning your story. Your story is so valuable to what you do and what we do. So I don't want to.
No.
But I
Actually,
just-
you read my mind because that's where we were going. She didn't tell you that to impress you. She told you that to impress upon you. She shared her story. Everybody up here has a story. Every one of you has a story, and there's power in it. Somebody else needs to hear it, to know that they're not alone going through what you went through on campus. Your story can help somebody else out. So taking it, the morsel is preach your parable, guys. Do not be afraid to share your story, because it is going to help somebody. Do not ever discredit your story. No takebacks? Next question, right here.
Hi, thank you guys so much for being out here today. I've just been so enriched by listening to you. My name's Angela, I'm from Norco College. I'm studying nutrition right now. My dream is to transfer from Norco College to Loma Linda, get my bachelor's there, and then actually go study naturopathic medicine in San Diego. After that, I'd really like to open my own clinic and see where I can go from there. My question to you guys is, with the way that the health industry is going right now, what does the future look like for somebody who's holistically minded like me? What are the opportunities that are going to be available? And how are things changing that's going to affect like the direction I'd like to be going?
They're going to
Yeah.
spend a lot of money.
Dang.
I will take a stab at it. So I am living proof of somebody who has totally embraced the holistic lifestyle. And I also do, champion our bio-Western medicine world. But you have a very bright future. There are always going to be people who are moving in that direction. There's this whole wave of what's called functional medicine or integrative medicine. And then we talked about teams earlier. That's really the wave of the future. Like, we're going to be working in a much more holistic way. We're going to be working with naturopaths. We're going to be working with MDs. We're going to be working with allied health professionals, health coaches. The direction that we're going is that it takes a lot of people to make sure that this individual is healthy. And part of that team, too, is also working with their family. So I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Anybody else want to chime in on that one? That was more like took care of it. All right, right here, ma'am.
Yes. Hello. I'm also very, very excited to see you and actually very grateful to hear all your stories. I've traveled, I've seen a lot of countries throughout the world, and I've seen how different, societies have access to, healthcare. I've been in Europe, I've been in Africa, and I'm obviously in the United States here. And what I've noticed is that, there is the one side, for example, in Europe, I've seen, that almost everyone has healthcare, almost free. And then I've seen, Africa where almost no one has regular access to healthcare. And now here in the United States, I see this, kind of in between. Most of the people are health insured, but there are also those who aren't. And everyone here is wants to make a change. And so I see all of you, who are basically in the positions who can make change and who obviously have made changes. And so what my question actually is, have you ever encountered, or what specific, scenario was it when you have encountered, you wanted to make some change happen, but you didn't get it through, someone, put a stop to it, and what situation did you encounter? How did you manage to deal with it?
Well, I'm a social entrepreneur. So as I talked about 3 organizational life cycles, I came into this work with, my work was part of a national initiative that we operated for 16 years, but really in the 5th year, so by the time Norling came to the table, I realized I'm managing somebody else's message, but I'm gonna do it because there's value to it, and we're gonna make some changes, and we're gonna leverage this national name. But I was off script since 1999, so when 2011 came and my students from Pepperdine gave us a formula, it was like, okay, we could make a switch. And a lot of times it's difficult when you find yourself managing someone else's message. You have to really be true to your heart. Can you You know, do you align with the mission? Do you align with the vision of the organization? And really living in being a part of an organizational culture. So this is it's really broad in answering your question, that if the organizational culture lives down to the supervisor level, then you've got a boss who's going to empower you and is going to allow you. But you can look on a website and you can see an organization that has a stated mission and vision and goals, and you know, and meet people who don't really live up to that. And so that's that frustration on the job, and it helps to ask different questions and better questions, because a lot of times we don't know that we don't know, and it's a lived experience. But when you start to really understand what you need, how you can come to the table, some things you're able to fix because that team relationship is really important. But then there's some things that you can't. So that means, you know what, that's your network, you're looking for a job. I need some informational interviews. And you start to learn the characteristics that you thrive in.
I want to add to that too. I think that change sometimes, I'm not very patient. And in fundraising, you can go through jobs every 18 months. And I've been pretty much true to that. Change, it can take, all of you know what corporate culture is? What organizational culture is? Okay, it's basically the way we do things around here. And it can take 7 years to change corporate culture. So just to add to what Winona said, know that it's not going to happen overnight. Know that there may be a point that you have to give up. But I'm working for an organization now where every single thing that people said when I got there was, we don't do it that way. Well, I was the first development person, and it's a healthcare organization, and we wanted to make some changes. We are making changes now 3 years later that when I walked in the door, all I heard was, no, we can't do it that way. So if you can stay within that culture, and it's a fine line. To me, it depends on who the leader is. If it's a leader that you trust and that you believe in, know that that person can create change, and you can be part of that change process.
I'm going to add one thing. So prior to my current position now, I was a health policy advocate. So it's basically like a fancy word for a lobbyist. But I used to work for a nonprofit, so we didn't call ourselves lobbyists. And so we would try to have our city council members, our state legislators, create policies that we thought were, just for the vulnerable communities. And there was this one campaign that I was part of, and it took a really long time. I learned a couple of things. It's exactly what you were saying. Like, you're going out there and you're trying to appeal to the hearts of these people who are making these decisions. And sometimes you have to change your message, but do it in a strategic way. Not that you're being unfaithful to why you're originally doing it, but sometimes you have to be flexible in that sense. You have to change your message, you have to change your tactics, but just be really mindful to be aligned with your overall mission and your goal. So oftentimes it does. The policy changes take a really long time. Really long time. Organizations said 7 years. Sometimes it's like decades before we see, policy changes. But I think that's just part and parcel of, what it is to be in this industry. And I think actually any industry, if you really want to have sweeping changes, sometimes it's not overnight.
Not always what you say, but how you say it.
Yep.
Framing that message to the right audience. Sir, did you have your hand up? I know you got yours up. Sharp-dressed man.
Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Caesar. I'm from Cal State LA. One thing that has been echoing throughout the whole entire conference has been the leadership role, and I see a lot of women in leadership roles. Can you share your experience as a leader, and what should the new generation look to aspire and how to do it?
Well, I would say there are definitely industries that have a lot more women in leadership roles than others. So that's one thing.
Nonprofit is one of them.
Nonprofit is one of them. I was in the agency private sector world for 18 years, and that was very male dominated. And it was interesting challenge. It was, I worked for 3 men at one point, who were the 3 partners of the agency. And, the challenges I had to face was as I moved up the ladder there, I became the first woman to run an office for them. And then I became the first working woman to run an office for them. And there was all this weird kind of scrutiny on me because of that. The opportunity was I was able to create policies around flexibility for working women, of which there are a lot of us, that didn't exist before because it was such a male-dominated business model, and their wives all stayed home and took care of the children. So they had a really hard time understanding what I was doing. So there was a lot of education and frustration that in years I spent in that space. When I went to Children's Hospital, the woman that called me to recruit me, the first coffee I had with her, I was straight up with her and I said, I have a 4-year-old. I do not want to be on airplanes every week. I do not want to miss picking her up. I want flexibility in my life and in my work, and I will outperform for you every time, but I need that. And she was like, done. I'm a working mom too. Her boss, working mom. Like, it went all the way up. We have a male CEO, but there's a ton of women in leadership who, you know, our demands are high of each other, of the men we manage, of the women we manage. Our demands are very high, but we're also incredibly efficient. You know, we get stuff done. So, I don't know, I've worked for some awful people, men and women. I've worked for some amazing people, men and women. And the one thing I do with my team is I honor where they all come from and what they all need to do in their life. They know the bar is high, but they also know they'll be rewarded when they leap over it, and I will take care of them when they need to be taken care of. And I just wish there was, you know, more management like that. There just isn't, but I lived it myself, so it's how I treat people.
Thank you. Well said.
Last question.
Hi there, I'm Morgan from Oregon State. I was just wondering, I'm going into public health dentistry, hopefully, and...
No.
You are.
You
will. There you go.
Yes. And I was just wondering, so how often are healthcare professionals actually brought to that table? And about like cultural change in a corporation, how do you go about that if you are unhappy? Do you just have to look for another corporation, or how does that spur or start?
I think it depends. So the answer is all the above. Because, you know, life is you're gonna be presented with different opportunities, right? So, like for me, never thought about becoming I knew in '97, I said, okay, healthcare seems to be my thing. So, said I was gonna become a consultant, travel the world, et cetera, suit and tie, make a whole bunch of money. But that opportunity came in the form of being a Navy healthcare officer. So instead of the suit and tie, I had the nice, like, white, crisp, you know, summer whites and all that, you know, officer and a gentleman. So, you know, you have to stay open. So you want to stay focused, right? So you want to keep your eyes on the prize, but you never know where that opportunity is going to come from. So at some points, you want to stay the course. You want to understand and then be understood, right? Stephen Covey. But then there's some times where it's not you giving up, but that time has come and gone. Another opportunity presents itself, so you want to take another opportunity. So, you know, the course for progression is never a straight upward line. It's more like, you know,
It's like traffic in LA.
It's like traffic in LA. It's slow sometimes, but you know, you might go on some detours that you never even thought of doing. And when they come up to you, you're like, oh, I don't, this is not right. But it might be the right thing. So, to make the change, and healthcare is really becoming more and more important, right? So, I think back when I'm coming up in the late 90s, it was still kind of nice, but now everybody's talking about healthcare. So with you being in public health, that's what you want your career to be in?
Public health dentistry.
Oh,
Public
I
health, okay.
could probably talk about
So
Yeah.
everybody at the table has something to offer. So you'll get invited to the table eventually. It just takes time.
And you could go so many places.
Mhm.
Operation Smile, a hospital, a clinic. You could, like,
And I was gonna say,
Private practice.
I'll give you my card and I'll introduce you to our dental director by email, who is amazing to talk to. There are so many opportunities in public health right now. And it's like any other job though, like everybody said. It may not be a right fit the first time, but there are going to be lots and lots more opportunities for public health in the years ahead.
I know you could do a whole workshop on salary, but I just want to say this, you know, I interview a lot of people coming in, I interview people transitioning careers. There's so much information out there that you can easily access to know your value in the market. And make sure you do that research before you go into a job interview. You know, find out what you can about what the typical salary is, and then you'll know if what they're offering you is fair. And as you work your way up in your career, keep an eye on that. I know what my value is in the market, and I expect to be paid that. You know, demand that from people. Other people are getting paid that. You know, there's a ton of stuff that exists on 990s of every big nonprofit. You can see what people are getting paid. So research, look into that, and never take less than you are worth. Know your value when it comes to salary, because once you get on that path, you can't go backwards again. You need to keep going up.
Progress, making steps. Well, guys, please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists. I'm sure all of them would be gracious enough if you had a few questions, if you wanted to come up. We will be transitioning into our next session here shortly. But again, thank Winona, Noylan, Don, Lisa, and Guy for all of the wisdom that they gave us today.